What's up, you guys? You're watching Civilopedia, and this is Civil. Alright, so in this episode, we talk about the Scythian people who came from the Eurasian steppe and left their mark on history as great warriors who also killed one of history's greatest kings, Cyrus the Great. Since the dawn of civilization, there has always been a struggle between those who settled cities and towns and between those who were hunter-gatherers and often raiding as well. This well-documented tension appears even in the earliest stories known to us. The Epic of Gilgamesh, where a wild creature is made by the gods, unwashed and speaking to animals. He is eventually brought into the fold by a priestess who lays with him and gives him beer, a sign of being cultured. The mighty Roman Empire fell to such nomadic peoples, and the Chinese built a great wall to keep them out. What's more remarkable is that a majority of these people who caused all of these troubles to the settlements came from the same region, the Eurasian steppe. This area has low rainfall, characterized by having tall mountains on its flanks, which prevent certain types of clouds from coming in, causing the rains to be very sparse. This type of low rainfall can only support grasses and doesn't support trees. So the trees don't steal all the sunlight, and the grasses thrive. In this kind of environment, it is absolutely peak for people who wander around with grazing cattle, horses, etc. This area is where horseback riding was pioneered, and it is this area from which came people like today's subject, the Scythians, but also people like the Huns, the Gokturks, and of course, the Mongols. Living on this area usually meant that you had a nomadic lifestyle. This is also due to the fact that there was less or none quarries of stone to build your cities of stone from, and certainly no trees to chop down in order to build houses from wood. The way people lived in this area is by using everything they could from their own animals, fermented mare's milk, and tents made from hide. In the 8th century BC, the people called the Masagetai started migrating from the central Eurasian steppe into the western part of it, closer to Europe. They eventually went on to pushing the Scythians more into the west, colliding with the eastern side of the Persian Empire. The Scythians were similar to their Masagetai cousins. They all spoke the saka language. The clothes that these people wore all came from their animals, wearing pointy hats, and we also know that they wielded spears, and most importantly, were excellent archers, shooting bows while riding, a technique that will become famous with basically anyone who ever came out of this region after them. Perhaps more interestingly, and again, this comes from the wiki article, guys, these guys were known to be smoking pot. They didn't build any monuments for us to be able to consider, and all the information we have about them comes from Herodotus, the Greek historian, living hundreds of years after the events had transpired. So it is what it is. Now, it is at this time that we become aware that there had been a king of these people, and he passed away. And so his wife, named Tomyris, took over as his widow to be the leader of the tribe. According to Herodotus, Cyrus saw that these people are coming to the edges of his empire. He heard that they are very fearsome warriors, and he heard that they have a queen, not a king, who is widowed. So he said to her, "Hey Tomyris, you want to get married? We'll unite our people and we can expand our realms and everybody can have a fantastic time." To which she responded that he should be happy and pleased with what he already has, spanning most of the known world, and he should leave her the rulership and leadership of her own people and their affairs. Cyrus didn't like this answer, and so as a response, on the advice of Croesus, he goes and decides to invade these people. At this point, the Scythians have been raiding parts of the eastern Persian Empire. In response, Cyrus decides to build a bridge across a river that separates the two kingdoms. Tomyris hears of this and she sends him messengers saying, again, that he should be happy with what he already has. Eventually, after he completes building this bridge, he is able to make an assault on the Masagetai/Scythian people, and his army is routed as they lose to the new tactics that they just are not accustomed to. Instead of fighting in a more traditional way where an army marches into an army, the Masagetai-Scythians are very good at hit-and-run tactics. Again, if you're familiar with any of this from people like the Mongolians, Gokturks, that's because that's kind of like what that area grows you to be. Discouraged, Cyrus retreats. And he thinks to himself, How can I defeat an enemy that refuses to meet me man to man on the battlefield? These guys are dispelling all of the schools of thought on how to fight. And if I don't win a war against them, they're going to continue raiding and creating trouble on my eastern borders. He concocts a very specific plan. He thinks if these people are truly wild men, then surely they can't handle wine. Now, it's important to mention that these people were drinking fermented mare's milk. Maybe they even had a glass of beer one time, but as anyone who's ever had alcohol knows, wine has a much higher alcohol content than beer or fermented mare's milk does. And so he sets up a huge banquet, and then eventually he leaves it out there for the Scythians to discover. So Tomyris' son, Spargopices, is marching with his troops when he suddenly discovers a banquet left behind by the Persian soldiers. His men are extremely happy. They think that maybe they scared the enemy into running the fuck away, and basically they decide that it's a great time to sit down and have a banquet, like the Persians wanted them to do. They get extremely drunk from the wine, and in their stupor, the Persians are able to march in and absolutely destroy them. As you can see, I have my own war tactics here, and this is my fearsome warrioress Nala, who will not take any bullshit from the Persian Empire. This is a bit of an atrocity in terms of, having no honor on the battlefield and enraging your enemy. The son of Tomyris, Spargopices, is captured alive, and in captivity he manages to convince Cyrus to let him free. After 4 days of freedom, he eventually kills himself from the shame of what had transpired. After Tomyris hears of what transpired to her son and the way that it all went down, she sends Cyrus a famously angry message, calling the wine a drug which made people who took it speak evil words and lose control of their actions, and demanded that Cyrus leave her lands or she would give him more blood than he can drink. The truth is that we don't really know how this story ends. We have a mythical ending where Tomyris' army attacks Cyrus' camp at night, slays the Great King, and bathes his head in a skin full of blood, fulfilling her promise. However, it's just one of 5 accounts on how Cyrus died, first of all, and second of all, there are no primal resources, meaning the Scythian Massagetae people did not write anything, and they certainly didn't write about this. One thing that we do know about and is interesting to us is this unit called the Saka Horse Archers, which we will discuss in the Civ 6 section about the leader. Let's go. Tomyris' later bonus in Civilization 6 is the Killer of Cyrus, aptly named. Her units receive +5 combat strength for all their units when attacking wounded units. The units also heal up to 30 hit points after killing an enemy unit. This probably has to do with the fact that these guys were really good at hit and run, so they would come in, wound you, and then they would be able to close in onto a fight in that manner. On the side of their units healing 30 hit points after killing an enemy unit, that's just fantasy, right? That doesn't happen in real life. The Scythians' unique ability is called People of the Steppe, which allows you to purchase light, heavy, and ranged cavalry units with faith. Well, in the game of Civ, they have different systems that allow you to produce units. Faith is definitely one of them, but it's more niche. What the game is trying to say here is you are born of cavalry. You are born of the steppe. Therefore, you have an additional, unique way to produce cavalry units on top of your production queue. It doesn't necessarily have to do with religious practices having to do with cavalrymen, more like this is what these people are, so they can produce these units in more than one way. The unique unit for the Scythians in Civilization 6 is the Saka Horse Archer. These units historically were excellent raiders, and they would be very good at harassing a column of marching soldiers or a baggage of train. They had very little staying power, and you can also see that in the game, where these units are very bad at defending themselves against attacking spearmen and swordsmen. As Alexander the Great was able to prove later on when he invaded the area, these units had no staying power. He deployed phalanxes supported by many archers standing on the ground, which had a higher rate of fire than these men riding on horses. So that's kind of like how these units became sunsetted eventually, losing their relevance in the region. The unique structure is called a kurgan, and this is an interesting talking point. First of all, in the game, kurgans give you a base yield of +1 faith, +3 gold, and +1 faith for each adjacent pasture. What's interesting about this, so first of all, historically, kurgans are these mounds. This could be as wide as 500 meters, 1,600 feet, and as tall as 27 meters, or 89 feet, in order to create a landmark. And in the center of it, they would perhaps bury important people, man or woman. We know of it from tales at the time, but none of these remain until today. So these tended to, stand out in the rolling terrain, which is completely barren of any landmarks other than that. And sometimes it is noted that they would decorate these mounds of dirt with the bodies of slaves and horses, just to ensure it got everybody's attention that here lie a great person. So there you have it. The Scythian Masagetai people, their saka horse archers, their mounds of dirt, and their vengeful queen who killed one of the greatest kings of the Iron Age. Catch you in the next episode when we move to classical Greece.